Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time for Friday Reads on July 21st. Yes, I checked the calendar in advance today, so I didn't have to stop and go remember what day it is. It is July 21st. We are cruising into the last 10 days of the month, believe it or not, and it is time once again to check in on this week in reading, viewing, etc. So we're definitely in a bit of a viewing slump, but maybe it's turning the corner. We're still watching Hijack. It seems like the plane has been hijacked for about 17 weeks at this point, but I think there's 2 episodes left. It is absolutely the silliest thing, but now we just have to see how it turns out. Like we're stuck in it. And then what are we? Oh, we're watching the documentary Last Call, which also is letting out 1 episode a week. And that's actually very good and pretty true to the book. But those, they only let out one a week. And I don't know how I spent my whole life up until just very recent years watching a whole bunch of different shows that came on once a week. Now my brain just doesn't work like that anymore. I kind of wish we go back to when every show always dumped the whole thing all at once, so I can just watch 1 or 2 episodes a night until it's done. Oh well. So we also we sort of traveled in and out of several different shows that just weren't to our liking, and right now we are watching a show from a few years ago that I don't know how many parts it has. It's a mini series called The Night Of. So maybe you saw it. I can't even remember what channel. I can't remember if it's HBO or Netflix, but it has Riz Ahmed and John Turturro, and it's about a young college student who has a rather ill-begotten evening. He's trying to have fun. He's trying to go to a party. He meets a girl, and things go really wrong. And now he is in jail as a prime suspect of a murder. And John Turturro is a lawyer who just happened to be passing through the jail and noticed him and has taken his case. So we've only watched maybe the first 2 episodes so far. So if you've seen that, you can comment below, and hopefully it has started out good, and we'll see. Something that is missing in the video viewing lineup is that we keep trying to find a show. We kind of like sometimes to watch a show that is, we do like mysteries and thrillers, and we do like, we watch dramas, we watch comedies. I guess we watch everything, but the hardest show to find a good one is speculative or science fiction type show. And some of the ones that we have watched and enjoyed are Severance, Counterpart, Travelers, I guess even Stranger Things, although that's pretty uneven. But that type of show, I guess Station 11 when it qualified, but that kind of speculative side, not science fiction like spaceships. Oh, and Hannah was another one that we liked. So that category, it is hard to find one that is, it's not boring, it's not too silly or dumb, it doesn't take forever to get going, has good acting. I guess we're really, really picky. But anyway, that is something I'm looking for. So if you have a suggestion in that category, and it is on Hulu, Netflix, HBO, or Apple, shoot me a message. All right, let's move on to the books. So this week I finished Facemaker, which I have been reading for several weeks on the side. Nonfiction book about the Dr. Howard, is his first name Howard? Harold Gillies, who pioneered facial reconstruction during World War I. And he was an example of a very innovative and creative doctor. And some of the things that are talked about in this book and some of the other doctors and dentists and people he worked with really illustrates that difference between the doctor who just does the status quo, exactly what they were taught in medical school, never thinks outside the box, or dedicated to endless problem solving. And the people who really stand out and pioneer things in history are the ones who do. And that would be Harold Gillies. And he saw the need for this kind of work to try to restore as close to normal as possible a facial appearance and function, not just patch someone up and keep them alive, or not just give them something that kind of works, but trying to restore body, mind, and soul, and also the details about the hospital that he established and the atmosphere there. And so the whole thing was really progressive for its time, even though it was hard for me to read the sheer amount of battle scene information that was in here. I wasn't really, I guess I should have expected that since it's about somebody who's repairing battle injuries, but I don't really love war stories, the actual combat and battle and horrible scenes. So it's kind of hard to read about how the injuries occurred, the nature of the warfare that led to it, and also there's photographs, and the photographs are tough as well. And she talks in the beginning about not being sure if she was going to include them, but I think it was really important to include them because Gillies captured. He had professional artists and photographers to document the progression of the surgeries, because a lot of these men had many surgeries to get from where they started to the finished effect. And so for several of the patients that are discussed in the book, we have the original photo, in-between photo, and a final photo. And you kind of have to see the beginning to see how far he went and how amazing his results were. I found it very interesting, kind of tough to read, but I'm glad that I did. So if you have any interest in medical history or World War I think both of those would be reasons to take a look at the Facemaker. That she also wrote a book called The Butchering Art, Joseph Lister's Quest to Transform the Grisly World of Victorian Medicine, which I'm terrified just by the title, and I probably won't read, even though I imagine it's really good just based on the Facemaker. But there you have it. The next book I read was for my band book club that is at the public library here in Corpus Christi, and this month's selection was 1984 by George Orwell. You can see I've upgraded from the little ratty old paperback I held up last week, and I borrowed Stephen's copy that I just gave him for his birthday. But 1984, well, first of all, the band book club, I've mentioned this before, so I'm kind of a fair weather frequenter of this club. Some months I just am not compelled to read the book that has been selected, but I try to challenge myself, especially if I have the book on hand. And so I really did want to read this and see what it did for me after not having read it since maybe my college age years. And they do pick mainly classics because they pick books that they will have multiple copies of, so that none of the participants would have to buy a book if they don't wish to. So I appreciate that. It does mean we don't read things that are currently, well, some of the classics are currently being challenged or banned, but we don't read new releases for this group. The last time I read this, as I mentioned, was probably during college. I think I read it a couple of times. I know I read it during high school, not for class, just because I had heard about it. And I know several of my friends, we read it, and I remember us talking about it, specifically having a conversation about what would be in our room 101, which is a place where whatever you most dread or fear is manifested. And I remember us wondering if we could game that system somehow and think about something that wasn't terrible to us a lot, and maybe they'd put that in our room instead, and then it wouldn't be so bad. I don't know why certain conversations remain in my memory bank, but I know I read it again at least once during early 20s college time because it was an important book to me at the time. I was really starting to gravitate to dystopian stories, which has been a love of mine throughout the years. And if you do like to read dystopian literature, this really is a classic in that field that is definitely worth your time. So 1984 was written in 1949, and it was George Orwell's second to last published work. His health was declining. One more book, Shooting an Elephant, came out in, I think, 1950, and he died. So, but this is what he was thinking about in the post-World War II era in England and Europe. And so the historical time that he was writing in does play a strong role in what was triggering his imagination in this novel about a world with a totalitarian regime. And if you have never read 1984, you've probably at least heard a lot of the common catchphrases that have moved into our common culture since that time. Big Brother is watching you, the thought police, doublethink, doublespeak, things like that. But it is a story about Winston Smith, who is a man who he says that he is 39 years old, but his mental and physical condition would suggest somebody much more older and worn out. He talks about his varicose veins, and he just seems kind of gray and saggy and depressed. Winston is an angry man. He's distrustful of the system that he lives in. He feels isolated. He feels like he's the only person who notices how contradictory and artificial reality is, and he has a hostility about women. He frequently has violent fantasies about people that he's angry with, and especially women. And I started to think about the common definition of an incel at some of his descriptions. I don't think that was the intention, and that certainly wasn't a phrase back at that time, but I got a little bit of that vibe at the initial portrayal of Winston Smith. But there's a lot more to Winston than that. But that was my initial impression. But Winston's job in this society is the part that I think is the most prescient in this book, because he alters news stories. He sits all day and he's given little pieces of news, and the government is always changing the narrative, who they're at war with, who actually exists or doesn't exist, who are we fighting against, who is a threat. And news pieces come in, and he is altering them retroactively so that the record reflects what is being currently projected. And this idea of someone in control and controlling the narrative controls everything. That basically what is put forth in the social media is reality itself, as far as anybody knows. And Winston looks around and wonders, how come I'm the only person who seems to remember that this was different yesterday? That the chocolate ration that you're saying was increased was actually decreased last week, and the increase is lower than where we were. And just every little thing like that, he's wondering, why is everyone so accepting of this? Is there a rebellion bubbling up somewhere, and how can I join it? And he spends all day trying to keep his face right, keep his utterances right, not be detected as somebody who is an alternative thinker. And into this difficult life comes a woman who passes him a note one day, and he begins to have an illegal affair with Julia. Julia's much younger. Her motivations for this behavior are different than his. I think he's a little disappointed in her because he thinks he has found someone who's very like-minded to think revolutionary thoughts with him, and that's not really what her aim is in this relationship. And I don't want to give too much away if you actually have not read this, but his choice to pursue this relationship sets off a series of events. And what was interesting to me in rereading this was as far as the themes, I was really struck with that whole idea of the media controlling people, and people just blindly accepting what they see on the screen or what they hear. And even there's even a little early form of AI where they are changing all of culture. Julia works in the literature department, and they are changing all of poetry and literature to be in this very bland, acceptable format, and they're computer generating it, poetry and songs. So that part really jumped out at me again. The other thing that I was noticing was that as a piece of fiction, has a really weird structure that didn't entirely work that well, I thought. And I don't remember noticing this as a young person. Maybe I was just all blown away by the novelty of it all. But the first part of the book, I really love the world building of what it's like where he lives, the job that he does, the people, the drudgery of it all, his little tiny acts of rebellion, like buying a journal and sitting in a spot where he can write privately. And then he starts the affair. Then in the middle of the book, it shifts to a part where he is reading a long political manifesto, and it's boring. It's just boring. I mean, I think it's very important and exciting to Winston, but it's kind of a slog, honestly, as a reader trying to read a novel. And then the last half of the book, it kind of gets back into the plot again. Anyway, I don't want to say too much and spoil it for anybody else, but I was happy to reread it. I think a lot of the worries and themes and ideas are still relevant. Where it fits in my personal list of favorite dystopian books, I think it's an important formative novel. I don't know if it's one of my all-time favorites in this category, but I think it's an important book, even though it's not a perfect book, and it has its strengths and weaknesses. So I did enjoy rereading it, though. Then the next book that I read on my merry way of reading this week was Take My Hand by Dolen Perkins-Valdez. This was the last book that I needed to read for the Booktube Prize judging. So now I just need to finish overthinking my rankings and send them in. And I'm not quite done with mercilessly tormenting myself with rearranging all the books in the middle. I know what I'm putting number 1 and 2. I know what I'm putting in number 6. I'm stuck in the middle with 3, 4, and 5. Just constantly shuffling them in my mind and trying to decide. And I'm just, it's kind of hard to rank things that aren't easy to compare, or I don't know. Then you get, I can't go into it because we're not supposed to. So I'll talk about it later, but I did read the book. And then what I'm currently reading right now is The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. And I guess I'm about halfway through this book. This came in for me at the library, and I had that book requested so long ago. I think I heard about this book back in January or February, and they have been processing it for months and months and months. And then, of course, it suddenly appears when I was in the middle of needing to read 1984 and Take My Hand this week, and it suddenly shows up, and I can't renew it, and I only, have like whatever, I don't know how many days, but I was like, I gotta read it right now. So I did go ahead and start reading it, and I am enjoying it quite a bit. Because it's a mystery, I have to reserve getting too excited until I get to the end, because sometimes they're good for a while and then they just Scooby-Doo out. You don't know what's going to happen at the end. But right now it's pretty good. Let me tell you a little bit about the what's going on. And also, if you're the person who recommended that, somebody recommended this to me a long time ago in a comment, and I put it on my list, and that's how it ended up here today. But I can't remember because it was way back. So if you're the person who recommended this book or this author, thank you, because I'm enjoying it. The Twyford Code is about a man named Steve Smith, and Stephen Smith, has had a hard life. His parents both left at different times. It's set in London, I think, or England. He was mostly raised by his older brother, but he fell in with a gang as a teenager and dropped out of school, and he kind of has lived a life of crime. He's been in and out of prison a number of times, And during his last longer incarceration, he finally learned how to read because Stephen's dyslexic, and back when he was a kid in school, he was really good at math, but he just could not read. He went to special classes and they worked with him and it just didn't work. But finally in prison, some literacy instructors came in and started a program and were able to help him learn how to read. So something new has been unlocked in his life, and he's obviously a very bright person, but he has no education. Constantly in this book, people are making references to things, either news events or literary references, and he never catches them because he's way behind. His biggest literary influence right now is Lord of the Flies, which is kind of touching because that is a book that you would read when you were around 14, which is when he left school, but he has just now discovered it. So anyway, so Stephen gets out of prison and he is thinking about, oh God, my foot fell asleep. Hold on. Sorry, my foot fell asleep. He has been thinking about something that happened decades before, right before he quit going to school. He was in a remedial English class with a small group of other kids, and it had a teacher named Miss Isles. And one day he finds a book on the bus and he brings it to class, and Miss Isles gets all excited about it. And she says, oh, this author, Edith Twyford, I think. Well, I know it's Twyford. Edith Twyford, who is a thinly veiled version of Enid Blyton in this book. She says, oh, I love these books, but now they're banned because they're racist. But there's these really good stories, and she reads the story to the class and they love the story, and then they go on an unauthorized field trip somehow connected to this book, and then he just cannot remember the details. What happened on this trip? Why did Miss Isles never come back to school? How did they get home? Who was driving? What's going on? And what does this have to do with her being so excited about this book and thinking that there are secret codes hidden in the book? So he starts trying to connect with those old classmates and see what they remember about this and if they remember anything about the Twyford Code. It is also about Stephen's life, his regrets. He has a son that he never knew growing up, who's now grown, has a family of his own. He's trying to connect with him, but the son is holding him at kind of at arm's length. He's not sure about Dad, and he gives him an old iPhone and says, well, you know, we can text and FaceTime, and I'm not ready to bring you into my family. And so the format of the book is Stephen is recording voice recordings on this phone, and the book is the transcriptions of the recordings. The very first page is somebody sending the recordings to a detective, or maybe the detective's sending them to an expert. But anyway, he has telephone calls. Other times they're more like a journal where he's just speaking to the phone, conversations where he has recorded, and they are partly about his quest to figure out what happened to Miss Isles, and they're partly about his quest to figure out what happened to himself and his life. And he talks about the gang that he fell in with, his family, his brother. So right now, that's where I'm at in the story, is there's sort of two things going on with Steve, where he is pursuing this mystery and getting very caught up in it, and also pursuing the lost threads of his life. So I am enjoying it very much so far. The reviews were all over the place, and a lot of people had trouble with this format. It kind of looks like this. There's lots of voice entries, and they're transcribed. So occasionally there's things like ellipsis, misspellings where the transcriber or the transcription software heard wrong, things like that. But I didn't find it off-putting at all. I just read like a novel that is a journal or epistolary to me, and it didn't affect me at all. So far so good, and I'll let you know how I feel about it. But hopefully this is one to recommend to the mystery lovers. That is it on my current reading. What am I getting ready to do? I'm getting ready to choose what I want to do as a longer side book. I'm also probably going to have time to read at least one more book before we go on a trip next week, and I'm trying to choose my trip reading. And I am moving into a period of time where I am not on any deadlines, schedules, events, etc. I'm going to have, August is going to be an unthemed month. So what is coming up on Tuesday, I'm going to do another one of the time warp videos. And I haven't decided if I'm going to pick a certain time, like try to find 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or if I'm just going to randomly grab something and see what I was reading that summer. So let me know if you have a preference of more recent, further back, do you care? And then I think I'm going to film my August TBR to post next Friday when I'm out of town, because it won't be a Friday reads because I won't be here. So I think I'll just I could do that in advance and have it come out next Friday. Okay, I think that's it. So let me know if you've read any of these books that I talked about today, or what your thoughts on them were, or something else that you read that you really loved this week. And let me know if you have any votes or preferences for a period of time or a certain year, or just wild card, or whatever your opinion is about what I should do for Time Warp Tuesday. And I think that is it for now. So I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Happy reading, and I will be back on Tuesday. Bye-bye.